Fear and Trembling is a philosophical work written by Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. It was published in 1843 under the pseudonym Johannes de Silentio, which translates to John of the Silence. The book explores the biblical story of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac, as recounted in the book of Genesis. Kierkegaard uses this story to delve into the themes of faith, ethics, and the nature of religious belief. He presents a critical examination of the traditional ethical theories of his time, particularly those rooted in the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. In his book Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard presents the story of Abraham from 4 different perspectives or viewpoints. These viewpoints serve to explore the various ways in which individuals can understand and interpret Abraham's actions and faith. Kierkegaard introduces the concept of the Knight of Faith as a contrast to the ethical individual. The Knight of Faith embodies a higher mode of existence that transcends the ethical realm. This individual is characterized by a passionate commitment to a higher purpose or belief, even in the face of absurdity and contradiction. Abraham serves as an example of the Knight of Faith, as his willingness to sacrifice Isaac defies conventional ethical norms. Through his exploration of Abraham's faith, Kierkegaard raises questions about the relationship between ethics and religious belief. He argues that faith involves a subjective leap that goes beyond reason and requires a personal commitment to the absurd. Kierkegaard emphasizes the importance of individual subjectivity and the existential struggle inherent in religious faith. Fear and Trembling is considered one of Kierkegaard's major works and is often regarded as an influential text in the fields of existentialism and religious philosophy. Its exploration of the nature of faith and the tension between ethics and religious belief continues to generate discussion and debate in philosophical and theological circles. The story of Abraham and Isaac is a significant biblical narrative found in the book of Genesis, chapter 22. According to the story, God tested Abraham's faith by commanding him to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac as a burnt offering. Abraham, despite his love for Isaac, was willing to obey God's command. As Abraham prepared to carry out the sacrifice, an angel intervened and provided a ram as a substitute, sparing Isaac's life. In Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard uses this story as a vehicle to explore profound philosophical and religious themes. He introduces the concept of the teleological suspension of the ethical, which means that there are certain situations where an individual's religious duty may transcend or suspend conventional ethical norms. Kierkegaard presents 3 stages of life that reflect different modes of existence: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. The aesthetic stage is characterized by living for personal pleasure and immediate gratification. The ethical stage involves adherence to universal ethical principles and societal norms. However, Kierkegaard argues that there exists a higher stage, the religious stage, which goes beyond the ethical. In the religious stage, an individual's relationship with God becomes paramount, and their actions may appear paradoxical or even contradictory from an ethical standpoint. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac exemplifies this religious stage. The 4 perspectives are as follows. The aesthetic perspective. This viewpoint represents the perspective of an ordinary individual who approaches the story of Abraham aesthetically, focusing on the external events and surface-level details. From this perspective, Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac may be seen as an act of heroism or madness, depending on the interpretation. The aesthetic perspective does not delve into the deeper existential and religious implications of Abraham's actions. In Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard explores the aesthetic perspective through the character of the young man in love. This character represents someone who approaches the story of Abraham from a superficial and aesthetic viewpoint, focusing primarily on the external events and surface-level details. The young man in love is captivated by the dramatic and romantic aspects of the story of Abraham. They might be drawn to the intense emotions, the suspenseful nature of the narrative, and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac. This perspective is interested in the story as a captivating tale rather than delving into deeper existential or moral considerations. The young man in love might be moved by the tension between Abraham's love for his son and his commitment to obey God's command. They may appreciate the narrative's twists and turns, the conflicts of loyalty and duty, and the gripping nature of the story as it unfolds. The focus is primarily on the aesthetic qualities and the emotional impact of the story, rather than its profound religious or ethical implications. However, the aesthetic perspective tends to overlook the deeper existential and moral questions that arise from the story of Abraham. It fails to engage with the subjective experience of faith, the inner turmoil faced by Abraham, and the profound ethical dilemmas that the narrative raises. Instead, it remains fixated on the external elements and the surface-level allure of the story. Kierkegaard presents the aesthetic perspective as limited in its ability to grasp the full depth and significance of Abraham's story. By contrasting it with other perspectives such as the ethical, religious, and the knight of faith, Kierkegaard prompts readers to move beyond the superficial and explore the existential and moral complexities that lie beneath the surface of the narrative. The ethical perspective. This viewpoint represents the perspective of an ethical individual who evaluates Abraham's actions based on universally accepted ethical principles. From an ethical standpoint, sacrificing one's own child would be seen as a violation of moral duties and a betrayal of parental responsibilities. The ethical perspective highlights the tension and conflict between ethical obligations and the demands of faith. In Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard explores the ethical perspective through the character of the judge. The judge represents someone who evaluates Abraham's actions based on universally accepted ethical principles and moral duties. The judge approaches the story of Abraham from a standpoint that emphasizes the importance of protecting and preserving human life. From an ethical perspective, sacrificing one's own child is seen as a grave violation of moral obligations and universally recognized ethical norms. The judge views this act as a betrayal of parental responsibilities and a breach of the duty to ensure the well-being and safety of others. The judge may question Abraham's decision and find it morally unjustifiable. They may grapple with the tension between Abraham's devotion to God and the ethical obligations he has towards his son. The ethical perspective prompts a consideration of the conflicts that arise when personal religious convictions clash with universally accepted moral principles. By highlighting the ethical perspective, Kierkegaard encourages readers to critically examine the moral dimensions of religious beliefs and actions. He prompts individuals to reflect on the challenges that emerge when faced with ethical dilemmas that test one's religious commitments. The ethical perspective invites a deeper exploration of the tensions and complexities that arise when subjective faith encounters universally recognized ethical obligations. In presenting the ethical perspective alongside other viewpoints in the book, Kierkegaard encourages readers to consider the nuanced interplay between ethics and faith. It challenges individuals to grapple with the difficult questions and moral quandaries that can arise when navigating the demands of personal religious conviction and the broader ethical framework of society. The religious perspective. This viewpoint represents the perspective of a religious believer who understands Abraham's actions within a religious framework. From this perspective, Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac is an act of faith and obedience to the divine command. It involves a subjective leap of faith that goes beyond reason and ethics. The religious perspective explores the profound existential struggle and inner turmoil experienced by Abraham in his encounter with God's command. In Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard explores the religious perspective as a way of approaching the story of Abraham that is rooted in religious faith and understanding. The religious perspective emphasizes the interpretation of Abraham's actions within a religious framework and understanding. It recognizes that Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac goes beyond conventional reason and ethical considerations. Instead, it is seen as an act driven by profound faith, devotion, and obedience to God. From the religious perspective, Abraham's story is viewed as a testament to his unwavering trust in God and his willingness to submit to divine commands. It acknowledges that the story presents a challenge to the normal ethical expectations and raises existential dilemmas. However, it understands Abraham's actions as a demonstration of his profound faith and belief that God's wisdom and goodness surpass human understanding. The religious observer recognizes that Abraham's act of faith is not driven by ordinary motives or ethical obligations. It represents a deeply personal relationship with the divine and a trust in God's will, even when it seems paradoxical or goes against commonly accepted norms. The religious perspective delves into the subjective experience of faith and the existential struggles faced by Abraham. It explores the inner turmoil, conflicts, and doubts that Abraham might have experienced as he grappled with the divine command. It invites readers to reflect on the depths of religious experience, the transformative power of faith, and the profound implications of a genuine and passionate relationship with the divine. Kierkegaard presents the religious perspective as crucial for understanding the story of Abraham and the nature of faith. It goes beyond the realm of reason and ethics, acknowledging the limitations of human understanding and embracing a personal relationship with the divine. The religious perspective prompts individuals to engage with the story on a deeper level, contemplating the mysteries and paradoxes inherent in religious faith and the significance of faith in one's life. The Knight of Faith perspective. This viewpoint represents the perspective of the Knight of Faith that Kierkegaard introduces. It goes beyond the religious perspective and embodies a higher mode of existence. The Knight of Faith views Abraham's actions as an extraordinary example of unwavering faith and a willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice. This perspective acknowledges the paradoxical nature of faith and the ability to maintain absolute trust in the face of absurdity and contradiction. The Knight of Faith perspective, as presented by Kierkegaard in Fear and Trembling, represents a higher mode of existence that surpasses both the ethical and religious perspectives. It embodies an individual who maintains an unwavering and absolute faith in the face of absurdity, contradiction, and uncertainty. An example of the Knight of Faith perspective can be seen in the character of Abraham himself. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac, his beloved son, is viewed from this perspective as an extraordinary act of faith that defies rationality and conventional understanding. From the Knight of Faith perspective, Abraham's actions are not bound by ordinary human motives or ethical considerations. Instead, they are seen as an expression of his deep personal relationship with the divine and his unwavering trust in God's will. Abraham's faith enables him to go beyond the constraints of reason and embrace the paradoxical nature of the divine command. The Knight of Faith recognizes that Abraham's act is a leap of faith, a profound existential and spiritual commitment that involves surrendering personal desires, ethical norms, and conventional expectations. This perspective acknowledges the inherent uncertainties and absurdities of existence but remains steadfast in the face of them, guided by a higher purpose or belief. The Knight of Faith perspective goes beyond the boundaries of reason and ethics, embracing a subjective and passionate commitment to a higher truth. It represents an exceptional individual who has attained a profound level of faith and personal relationship with the divine. The Knight of Faith is willing to suspend or transcend ethical norms and conventional expectations when confronted with the demands of faith. Kierkegaard presents the Knight of Faith perspective as a challenge and an ideal to strive for, rather than a universal model for everyone to emulate. It represents an individual who has achieved a level of faith that enables them to embrace the paradoxes, uncertainties, and absurdities of life with unwavering trust in the divine. By exploring the Knight of Faith perspective, Kierkegaard invites readers to reflect on the nature of belief, the radical commitment required for genuine faith, and the subjective aspect of religious experience. It challenges individuals to question their own assumptions, to consider the possibility of a higher mode of existence that embraces paradox, uncertainty, and the limitations of human understanding. By presenting the story of Abraham from these different viewpoints, Kierkegaard aims to provoke reflection and challenge conventional understandings of faith and ethics. Each perspective offers a unique lens through which the reader can examine the complexities and implications of Abraham's actions, highlighting the subjective and multifaceted nature of faith and the existential choices individuals face in their religious beliefs. Analysis of Abraham's story in Fear and Trembling. He focuses on the profound paradox and absurdity of Abraham's situation as he is asked to sacrifice his son. Kierkegaard highlights the magnitude of Abraham's test and the immense conflict it presents to his faith. Abraham is faced with a direct command from God, asking him to sacrifice his own son, who is the promised heir through whom God's covenant will be fulfilled. This command goes against conventional moral and ethical norms, which value the preservation of life and the protection of innocent individuals. The absurdity of the situation lies in the contradictory demands placed upon Abraham. On one hand, he has a deep and loving attachment to his son, which naturally leads him to desire his well-being and protection. On the other hand, he is confronted with the divine command to sacrifice Isaac, which seemingly contradicts his paternal instincts and ethical responsibilities. Kierkegaard explores the intense inner conflict this poses for Abraham. On the one hand, he could choose to follow his ethical duty to protect and preserve the life of his son. This would be the reasonable and ethical response expected of a parent. On the other hand, he faces the demand of faith, where he must suspend or transcend ethical norms and submit to the will of God, even if it seems absurd and incomprehensible. Abraham's struggle is not a matter of simple obedience or blind submission. It involves a profound existential crisis, as he grapples with the tension between his personal attachments, ethical obligations, and the demands of faith. The inner turmoil he experiences reflects the profound nature of his faith and the depth of his commitment to God. Kierkegaard does not present Abraham as a model to be imitated, nor does he offer a clear resolution to the ethical dilemma posed by the story. Instead, he uses Abraham as an exemplification of the religious stage and the radical nature of faith. Abraham's willingness to obey God's command, despite its absurdity, becomes an expression of his passionate and subjective relationship with the divine. In the religious stage, individuals go beyond the boundaries of reason and ethics to embrace a subjective and passionate relationship with the divine. They recognize the limitations of human understanding and acknowledge that faith involves a leap beyond what can be rationally explained or justified. Kierkegaard emphasizes the subjective nature of faith in the religious stage. It is not a matter of adhering to established dogmas or following external religious rituals, but rather a deeply personal and existential encounter with the divine. Faith involves an intimate and individual relationship with God that goes beyond objective knowledge or rational comprehension. The religious individual experiences a sense of absolute dependence on God, recognizing their own finitude and the transcendent nature of the divine. They may encounter paradoxes and tensions within their faith, grappling with the mysteries and uncertainties inherent in religious belief. Kierkegaard contrasts the knight of faith with the ethical individual. While the ethical individual adheres to universal ethical principles and societal norms, the knight of faith operates on a different plane. The knight of faith is willing to suspend or transcend ethical norms when confronted with the demands of faith. The knight of faith embraces a paradoxical existence. They may be engaged in ordinary activities and live a seemingly normal life, but their inward commitment to the divine or a higher purpose is unwavering. They experience a deep personal relationship with God, and their faith becomes the ultimate guiding force in their life. It's important to note that Kierkegaard's concept of the knight of faith should not be seen as a prescriptive model for everyone to emulate. Instead, it serves as a thought-provoking exploration of the subjective aspects of faith and the existential choices individuals face when confronted with the demands of their religious convictions. Kierkegaard considered religion to be of utmost importance in human existence. He believed that religious faith and the subjective relationship with the divine were fundamental aspects of a meaningful and fulfilled life. For Kierkegaard, religion provided individuals with a framework to navigate the complexities of existence and to grapple with the profound questions of purpose, meaning, and ethics. He saw religion as offering answers to existential dilemmas that reason and ethics alone could not fully address. Kierkegaard emphasized the subjective nature of religious faith, highlighting the significance of personal commitment, individual experience, and the existential struggle that accompanies it. He argued that true faith involves a passionate and subjective leap beyond the limitations of reason and ethics, embracing the paradoxes and uncertainties inherent in religious belief. While Kierkegaard advocated for the importance of religion, it is important to note that he did not promote a specific religious doctrine or dogma. His focus was on the subjective experience of faith and the authentic engagement with one's own religious beliefs. Kierkegaard's exploration of religion in his works aimed to challenge conventional thinking, encourage individual reflection, and promote a deeper understanding of the subjective aspects of faith. He saw religion as a vital dimension of human existence, providing individuals with a source of meaning, purpose, and spiritual fulfillment. Overall, Kierkegaard's philosophy underscores the significance of religion in our lives, acknowledging the existential questions it addresses and the transformative power it can have on the individual's subjective experience and understanding of the world.